My friend's sister claimed I was the father of her baby, refused to take a DNA test, and destroyed my reputation. To make things worse, even my parents backed her financially and didn't believe me. A few weeks ago, my world completely fell apart. It was Alex's birthday party, a night I expected to be fun, filled with beers, jokes, and catching up with old friends. Instead, it turned into a scene I'll never forget. It was late in the evening, and I was standing by the patio, chatting with a few people about some football game, when Chloe, Alex's younger sister, suddenly walked up to me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice shaky. I thought she wanted advice about something, or maybe needed help finding Alex. Chloe and I weren't close, but I'd known her since she was a teenager. I figured she saw me as an older brother type because of my friendship with Alex. I stepped away from the group and followed her to a quieter spot near the kitchen. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out. My first instinct was to congratulate her. I didn't know she was seeing anyone. But before I could say anything, she added, "And it's yours." I laughed out loud, thinking she was messing with me. "Very funny, Chloe," I said. But she wasn't smiling. She wasn't even blinking. "You're going to be a dad," she said again, this time in a whisper, as if she was bracing herself for my reaction. That's when it hit me. She was serious. Dead serious. My stomach flipped. "Wait, what?" I stammered. "How could it?" I couldn't even finish the sentence. Chloe and I had never been together. Not even close. The idea was insane. I tried to tell her that, but her face crumpled like she was about to cry. And suddenly, Alex appeared behind us. "What's going on?" Alex asked, narrowing his eyes. He must have overheard something, because Chloe turned to him, and before I could stop her, she said, "I told him." "He knows now." I froze. "Knows what?" Alex said, looking back and forth between us. Then Chloe dropped the bombshell again. "I'm pregnant." "It's his." For a second, Alex didn't say anything. He just stared at me, and I could see the gears in his head turning. Then his face contorted with anger, and he shoved me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he yelled. "How could you do this to my sister?" "To me?" I tried to explain. "Alex, I swear, I don't know what she's talking about. This didn't happen. I've never." But he wasn't listening. He stormed off, leaving Chloe standing there with tears streaming down her face and everyone in the room staring at us. The whisper started almost immediately. I left the party shortly after that, too shaken to deal with it. By the time I woke up the next morning, the damage was already done. Half our friend group had heard Chloe's claim, and my phone was blowing up with texts and missed calls. Some people were supportive, asking if I was okay or if I needed to talk. Others weren't so kind. "How could you hook up with Alex's sister?" one message read. "Dude, that's so messed up," said another. It didn't matter how many times I denied it. No one seemed to believe me. Even Alex blocked me on everything, which hurt the most. He was my best friend. How could he think I'd betray him like this? But the worst part came when Chloe started doubling down. I texted her, begging her to stop spreading the lie, but she didn't reply. Instead, she started telling people that I was trying to deny responsibility. One of my friends even sent me a screenshot of a post she'd made on social media. It was vague, but the message was clear. She was facing this journey alone because the baby's father was too scared to step up. I felt like I was drowning. No matter what I said, no one seemed to care. People I'd known for years were suddenly looking at me like I was some kind of villain. I kept replaying that moment at the party in my head, trying to figure out what Chloe's angle was. Did she genuinely believe what she was saying? Or was this some kind of sick game? Either way, it didn't make sense. It was like my life had been hijacked, and I had no idea how to get it back on track. By the end of that first week, I was exhausted, angry, and completely isolated. Every time I tried to stand up for myself, it only seemed to make things worse. I needed help, someone to back me up, someone to believe me. But as the days went on, I started to realize just how alone I really was. After the disaster at Alex's birthday party, I hoped my parents would be my safe haven, the one place I could count on for support. Instead, talking to them turned into one of the most gut-wrenching moments of my life. I showed up at their house on a Sunday morning, my hands trembling as I rang the doorbell. Mom greeted me with her usual warmth, but I could already tell she knew something was up. "You look terrible," she said, ushering me inside. "I need to talk to you guys," I said, following her into the living room. My dad was there, sipping his coffee and reading the paper. He looked up with a raised eyebrow. "What's so urgent?" he asked, folding the paper in half. I didn't waste time. I told them everything. The party, Chloe's claim, the fact that Alex had cut me off, and how the rumors were ruining my life. "But it's not true," I said, my voice cracking. "It's impossible." Chloe and we've never been together. My mom's expression shifted into something I can only describe as skeptical pity. My dad set his coffee mug down and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. So why would she say it's yours then? He asked. I don't know, I admitted, my voice rising in frustration. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But it's not true, and she's refusing to take a paternity test. Refusing, my mom asked, frowning. That doesn't make any sense. Exactly, I said, hoping they'd finally see how ridiculous the whole thing was. But instead of siding with me, they exchanged a look, a quiet, loaded glance that sent a chill down my spine. Look, my dad said, his tone shifting to something more stern. I don't know why she'd lie about this. It's a serious thing to accuse someone of. If she says the baby is yours, you need to take responsibility. We raised you better than this. I stared at him, dumbfounded. You're not seriously taking her side, are you? I asked. You're my parents. You know me. I would never. Of course we know you, my mom interrupted, her voice softer but no less hurtful. But accidents happen. Maybe you don't remember. Maybe it was a mistake. But if there's even a chance that this baby is yours, you can't just walk away. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. It's not mine, I said firmly. I'm willing to take a paternity test right now to prove it. But Chloe won't agree to one. And why not? My dad asked, his tone accusatory now. If you're so sure, why would she refuse? I don't know, I shouted, standing up. But that doesn't mean I'm lying. My mom flinched at my outburst, and I immediately felt guilty. But I was so frustrated, so betrayed, that I couldn't stop. You're supposed to have my back, I said, my voice shaking. Instead, you're just assuming I'm some deadbeat who's trying to weasel out of responsibility. How can you even think that? We're not saying you're lying, my mom said quietly. But Chloe's pregnant, and she's scared. The baby could be yours, and she needs support. Until there's proof, you can't just abandon her, my dad added. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents were taking Chloe's side over mine, acting like her baseless accusation was more credible than my word. And then, as if to twist the knife even further, my mom said, we've already started helping her out financially. She's going to need it, especially if you won't step up. That hit me like a punch to the gut. You're giving her money? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She's going to have a baby, my mom said, as if that explained everything. We're not going to let her struggle. I felt my temper flare again. You're enabling her, I snapped. You're treating me like I've already been proven guilty, like I'm some irresponsible kid who knocked her up and ran away. I'm your son, for God's sake. Don't you trust me? It's not about trust, my dad said, his voice hard. It's about doing the right thing. Then why don't you demand she take the test? I countered. If you're so sure about doing the right thing, why doesn't anyone care about the truth? Neither of them answered. They just looked at me like I was the problem, like I was the one being unreasonable. I realized then that no matter what I said, no matter how much I begged or reasoned, they weren't going to see things my way. They were too caught up in the idea of protecting Chloe and her unborn child. I left their house feeling more alone than ever. It wasn't just about Chloe's lie anymore. It was about how easily the people closest to me had turned their backs. My parents, who had always been my rock, had chosen to believe someone else over their own son. And no matter how many times I replayed the conversation in my head, I couldn't make sense of it. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about Chloe, about Alex, about all the people who used to be in my corner. Now it felt like I was fighting the entire world on my own. And worst of all, I had no idea how to fix it. It didn't take long for Chloe's accusations to spread beyond our immediate circle. At first, it was just whispered conversations between mutual friends, the kind where people think you don't notice but you catch them glancing your way. But within days, it had ballooned into full-blown accusations that followed me everywhere I went. My phone rarely stopped buzzing. Messages from old friends, co-workers, even acquaintances I barely knew. Is it true? I can't believe you'd do that to Alex. Man, what's wrong with you? The worst were the ones that tried to sound supportive but only rubbed salt in the wound. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. It's okay to make mistakes. Work wasn't the safe haven I'd hoped it would be. At first, I thought maybe no one there would hear about it, but that hope evaporated quickly. My co-workers, usually chatty during lunch breaks or meetings, started acting weird. Casual conversations became stiff and awkward. People who used to greet me warmly with, "How's it going?" started offering quick nods before walking off. One day, I overheard two of them talking near the coffee machine, their voices just low enough to make me strain to hear. "He's the one, right? Chloe's baby?" That's what I heard. Alex's sister. Can you imagine? I felt my face burn, and my first instinct was to confront them. But what was the point? The damage was done. The tipping point came when my boss called me into his office. At first, I assumed it was about a project deadline, but the moment I sat down, I knew it wasn't going to be a normal conversation. "Everything okay at home?" he asked, his tone deliberately neutral. I stared at him, caught off guard. Yeah, why?" I asked, though I knew exactly where this was headed. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I've heard things. I don't want to pry, but if there's something going on, maybe it's best to take some time to sort it out. Before it starts affecting your work." Translation: your personal drama is making people uncomfortable, and we'd all appreciate it if you dealt with it somewhere else. I nodded and assured him everything was fine, but the humiliation lingered long after I walked out of his office. Outside of work, things weren't much better. A few of my closest friends still stuck around, but even they seemed unsure of me. One night, during what was supposed to be a relaxing hangout, one of them finally voiced what I knew they'd all been thinking. "Are you sure nothing happened with Chloe?" he asked, staring at me intently. "I mean, people don't just make stuff like this up for no reason." His words hit me like a slap. "You think I'm lying?" I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, man, it's not that," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "It's just the whole situation is weird, you know?" I didn't say anything after that. What was the point? If even my friends were doubting me, what chance did I have of convincing anyone else? Meanwhile, Chloe was doing everything in her power to make me look guilty. She started posting vague updates on social media, the kind designed to stir up speculation. "Being strong for the little one post read, accompanied by a picture of her resting her hand on her stomach. Another one said, "Even when people let you down, your baby gives you the strength to keep going." She never mentioned me by name, but she didn't need to. Everyone knew who she was talking about. Then, one morning, I woke up to the most gut-wrenching post yet, a blurry ultrasound photo with the caption, "No matter what happens, I'll always have you." The comments were filled with an outpouring of sympathy. "You're so brave, Chloe," one person wrote. "That baby is lucky to have a mom like you," said another. But it was the comments about me that really twisted the knife. "Shame on the father for not stepping up. He doesn't deserve either of you." I wanted to scream. Every word, every like, every share felt like another blow to my already shattered reputation. I tried to keep my head down, but Chloe wasn't content to let the rumors simmer. She started showing up at places she knew I'd be, bars, mutual friends gatherings, even a neighborhood barbecue. At each event, she played the heartbroken victim, telling anyone who'd listen about how I was ignoring my responsibilities and refusing to be there for the baby. At one party, I overheard her telling a group of people, "I just don't understand how he can deny it. He knows it's his. He's just scared." She even made herself cry, her voice trembling as she talked about how hard it was to go through this alone. The worst part? People believed her. They consoled her, hugged her, and shot me dirty looks from across the room. The pressure was suffocating. I started avoiding social events altogether, not because I didn't want to see my friends, but because I couldn't handle the stares and the whispers. Every time I walked into a room, it felt like the conversation stopped just long enough for people to glance my way before pretending to be interested in something else. Even my landlord got involved. One day, he stopped me in the hallway and said, "Hey, I heard about your situation. Let me know if you need any extra time on rent or anything. Babies are expensive, you know." I stared at him, speechless. "Thanks, but I'm not having a baby," I muttered before walking away. The pity in his eyes made me want to crawl under a rock. By now, I felt completely trapped. My personal life was being dragged through the mud, and no matter how much I denied Chloe's claims, it didn't seem to matter. She had the perfect sob story, and I had no proof to back me up. Every time I thought about her, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could someone lie so easily? What was her endgame? I didn't have answers, only the sinking realization that my life might never be the same. I should have known something was off the moment my mom called and asked me to come over for a family meeting. Her voice was too formal, her words too clipped, like she was preparing for an uncomfortable conversation. I told myself it was just another lecture about stepping up or some misguided attempt to mediate between Chloe and me, but it turned out to be so much worse. When I walked into the living room, my parents were already seated side by side on the couch, their expressions unreadable. My dad gestured for me to sit, and I reluctantly plopped down in the armchair across from them. "What's this about?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "We've been talking," my mom began, clasping her hands tightly in her lap. "And we think it's time for you to take more responsibility for this situation." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "We think you should move back home," she said, her tone so casual it felt surreal. That way, you can be closer to Chloe and help her during the pregnancy. It's not fair for her to go through this alone. For a moment, I just stared at them, trying to process what I'd just heard. Move back home? To support Chloe? It sounded like a joke, except neither of them was laughing. You're kidding, right? I said, my voice tinged with disbelief. But my dad shook his head. Your mom's right, he said. Chloe needs help, and as the father, it's your responsibility to provide it. You can't just leave her to fend for herself. I'm not the father. I snapped, the words exploding out of me before I could stop myself. How many times do I have to say it? I've never even been with Chloe. This is insane. My mom frowned, her expression filled with a mix of disappointment and pity. We've heard you, but the fact is Chloe is pregnant, and she says it's yours. If you're so sure it's not, then why won't you take a DNA test? Exactly, I said, throwing my hands up. She's the one refusing the test, not me. Doesn't that tell you anything? If she was telling the truth, she'd want to prove it, right? My dad sighed heavily, the kind of sigh he used to let out when I got caught sneaking out as a teenager. We can't force her to take a test, son, he said, his voice firm. And we can't ignore the fact that there's a baby on the way. Whether it's yours or not, that baby is going to need a father figure. The audacity of his words hit me like a slap. Are you serious right now? I said, my voice rising. You're asking me to drop everything, to quit my job, and what? Pretend to be this kid's dad just because Chloe says so? Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? My mom reached out and put a hand on my dad's arm, like she was trying to calm him down. No one's asking you to pretend, she said softly. But what if she's telling the truth? What if the baby really is yours? Can you live with yourself, knowing you abandoned them? The sheer absurdity of it all made my head spin. How can you guys believe this crap? I yelled, slamming my hand on the table. I'm your son. You've known me my whole life. And you're taking her word over mine? Over a test that could clear this up in 5 minutes? My dad's face hardened. Watch your tone, he said sharply. We're not choosing sides. We're trying to do what's best for everyone involved. By throwing me under the bus? I shot back. By treating me like I'm guilty until proven innocent? You're not helping anyone. You're just letting Chloe manipulate you with her sob story. The room fell into an uneasy silence. My mom looked like she wanted to say something, but my dad spoke first. You need to think about the baby, he said, his voice low but firm. This isn't just about you anymore. Those words, more than anything else, broke me. They weren't just taking Chloe's side. They were dismissing me entirely. My protests, my denials, my request for a paternity test, it all meant nothing to them. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You know what? I'm done, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. I'm done trying to convince you. If you want to believe Chloe's lies, fine. But don't expect me to play along. My mom called after me as I stormed toward the door, but I didn't look back. The moment I stepped outside, the cold night air hit me like a wake-up call. My hands were trembling, and my heart was racing, but the anger inside me burned hotter than ever. I couldn't believe how easily my parents had been swayed by Chloe's story, how little my words seemed to mean to them. As I drove home, the weight of their betrayal settled heavily on my chest. They weren't just doubting me. They were asking me to sacrifice everything for a lie, to dismantle my life because Chloe refused to face the truth. And the worst part? A small, painful part of me still wanted their approval, still wanted them to believe me. But after tonight, I wasn't sure that would ever happen. Weeks blurred into months, and my life remained a constant cycle of frustration and isolation. Every attempt to clear my name seemed futile. Chloe had dug her heels in, refusing a paternity test while doubling down on her public victim narrative. The closer her due date got, the worse the pressure became. People kept telling me I was running out of time to step up, as if the ticking clock somehow made her lies more believable. Even my parents, though slightly less vocal, still looked at me like I was a ticking time bomb of disappointment. For a while, I just shut down. I stopped going out. I ignored the whispers at work. I deleted my social media. It wasn't worth the constant flood of judgment from people who didn't know the whole story or didn't care to hear it. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was just my life now. A reputation ruined, a family lost, all because someone decided I was an easy target. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, the phone call came. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was lying on the couch, staring blankly at the TV when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was another concerned friend or worse, Chloe herself. But something made me pick up. Is this my name?" a hesitant voice asked. "Yeah," I said warily. "Who's this?" "It's Rachel," she said, her voice soft and uncertain. I'm friends with Chloe." My heart sank. What fresh hell was this? "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering to hide the irritation in my voice. "Look, I know you probably don't want to hear from me," she said quickly, "but I need to tell you something. I can't keep this to myself anymore." There was a long pause. I sat up, gripping the phone tighter. "Okay," I said cautiously. "What is it?" Rachel sighed, like she was working up the courage to say what she'd called to say. "Chloe's lying," she finally blurted out. "The baby isn't yours." My heart raced, and for a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "She told me," Rachel said. "She told me months ago, right after she found out she was pregnant. The real father is some guy she hooked up with at a party. He ghosted her, and she freaked out because she didn't want to raise the baby alone. So she picked you." I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. "She picked me?" I repeated, incredulous. "She said you were the safest option," Rachel explained. "She figured you'd feel guilty enough to stick around. And, well, you seemed like someone people would believe." She hesitated before adding, "I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. She's my friend, and I didn't want to betray her, but I can't watch you go through this anymore." The weight that had been crushing me for months suddenly lifted, replaced by a simmering rage. "Why are you telling me this now?" I demanded. "Do you realize what she's done to my life?" "I know," Rachel said, her voice breaking. "I know, and I'm sorry. I couldn't stay quiet anymore." For a moment, I didn't know whether to thank her or hang up on her. On the one hand, her confession was the first piece of good news I'd had in months. On the other, it didn't change the fact that Chloe had dragged my name through the mud while Rachel sat on the sidelines and watched. "You have no idea what this has done to me," I said finally, my voice trembling. "I've lost friends. My own family doesn't believe me. And now you're telling me it was all some twisted plan because Chloe didn't want to take responsibility?" "I know," Rachel said again. "But I don't know what to do. I don't have proof, and I don't think Chloe's going to admit it." That stopped me cold. She was right. Rachel's word might help me get some people back on my side, but it wasn't enough to force Chloe to take a paternity test or to undo the damage she'd done. If anything, confronting Chloe with Rachel's confession might just make her dig in deeper. I needed more. I needed something definitive. "Can you convince her to take the test?" I asked. "If she's lying, she won't agree to it. But if she does, I can clear my name once and for all." Rachel hesitated. "I can try," she said. "But Chloe, she's stubborn. And honestly, I don't think she cares about the truth anymore. She's too caught up in the lie." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was right, Chloe didn't care. She'd spun a narrative so tightly that the truth didn't matter anymore. Not to her, not to most people. And yet I couldn't give up. Not now. Not when I finally had a sliver of hope. "Try," I said firmly. "Please. If you care at all about fixing this, convince her." Rachel promised she'd do her best, but as I hung up, I felt more uncertain than ever. It was a relief to finally have confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that this nightmare wasn't my fault. But without Chloe's admission or a paternity test, Rachel's confession was just words. For now, all I could do was wait and hope that Chloe's web of lies would finally start to unravel. I spent the next few days after Rachel's call going over my options. I couldn't rely on Rachel's word alone. Chloe had woven her lies so tightly that one person's confession wouldn't unravel it. But knowing the truth finally gave me the strength to push back. If Chloe wasn't going to take a paternity test willingly, I needed to force her hand. And to do that, I had to confront her directly. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Alex's parents were throwing a small get-together at their house. One of those casual gatherings where everyone drinks too much cheap wine and pretends they're still close. I wasn't invited, of course, but I knew Chloe would be there. It wasn't hard to figure out when Alex's parents would be out of the room and Chloe would be alone. I timed it perfectly, showing up just as people started to trickle home. When I walked through the door, Alex spotted me immediately. "What the hell are you doing here?" he snapped, storming toward me. I held up my hands. "I'm not here to cause a scene," I said, keeping my voice low. "I just need to talk to Chloe. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Alex looked like he wanted to throw me out on the spot, but before he could, Chloe appeared at the end of the hallway. She froze when she saw me, her expression twisting into something between shock and anger. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I need to talk to you," I said firmly, ignoring Alex's growing irritation. "Alone?" "Chloe, don't," Alex started, but she waved him off. "It's fine. she said, her eyes locked on mine. Let's just get this over with. She led me into the kitchen and closed the door behind us. The room felt smaller than I remembered, the air thick with tension. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence almost unbearable. Then I took a deep breath and said the words I'd been rehearsing in my head for days. I know I'm not the father, I said, keeping my voice steady. And I know you know it too. So why won't you just take the damn test? Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't yell, didn't deny it outright. Instead, her eyes darted around the room, like she was looking for an escape. For a split second, I thought she might actually admit it. But then she straightened up, her expression hardening. You're unbelievable, she said, her voice trembling with anger, or maybe fear. You're just trying to get out of this, aren't you? You've always been a coward. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my temper in check. This isn't about me running away, I said. It's about the truth. If you're so sure the baby's mine, why are you so scared of the test? Her eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite place. Defiance, maybe, or guilt. I'm not scared, she said, crossing her arms. But I shouldn't have to prove anything to you. You know what you did? The sheer audacity of her words made my blood boil. What I did? I said, my voice rising. I didn't do anything, Chloe. We both know that. You're lying, and you're ruining my life for no reason. How can you live with yourself? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not this time. You have no idea what I've been through, she said, her voice breaking. You think I wanted this? To be pregnant and alone? I'm doing the best I can, and all you've done is make it harder. Because it's not my responsibility. I snapped. The real father is out there, and instead of holding him accountable, you decided to pin it on me. Why, Chloe? Why me? She didn't answer. She just stood there, her tears falling silently. For a moment, I thought she might finally crack, finally admit the truth. But then she shook her head and turned away. This conversation is over, she said, her voice flat. Get out of my house. No, I said, stepping closer. I'm not leaving until you give me an answer. Why me, Chloe? Why did you choose me? She whirled around, her face a mix of anger and desperation. Because you're safe, okay, she shouted. Because you're a good guy, and I thought you'd help me. I didn't think you'd fight me on this. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, all I could do was stare at her. You didn't think I'd fight you? I repeated, my voice hollow. You lied about something this huge, and you thought I'd just go along with it? She didn't reply. Instead, she opened the door and gestured for me to leave. We're done here, she said, her voice cold. I wanted to keep pushing, to force her to admit everything, but I knew it wouldn't work. Not now. Chloe was too entrenched in her lie, too scared to let it unravel. So I walked out, my chest tight with frustration and anger. Alex was waiting in the hallway, glaring at me like he was ready to throw a punch. Stay away from my family, he said through gritted teeth. I didn't respond. I just kept walking, my mind racing. The confrontation hadn't gone the way I'd hoped, but it wasn't a total loss. Chloe had slipped, if only for a moment. She'd admitted she chose me because I was safe. It wasn't enough to prove my innocence, but it was a start. And if she wasn't going to admit the truth willingly, I'd have to find another way to make her face it. For months, my parents continued to support Chloe unwaveringly, their loyalty to her and her story solid as stone. It didn't matter how much I begged them to listen or how many logical arguments I laid out about the impossibility of her claims. They refused to hear me. My mom would shake her head in disappointment, saying, why would she lie about something so serious? My dad would add, you need to focus on what's important, the baby, as if that settled the matter. Every conversation ended with me walking away, defeated, wondering how my own parents could believe someone else's word over mine. Chloe, emboldened by their support, continued her charade. She started spending more time at my parents' house, weaving herself further into their lives. I'd hear from mutual friends how they'd gone shopping with her for baby clothes, or how my mom was attending her prenatal classes to help her prepare. It was maddening, but by that point, I'd stopped trying to argue. It was like screaming into the void. No one cared about my side of the story. I started to accept that this nightmare might never end. Then, out of nowhere, Alex called me. Seeing his name flash on my screen felt like a gut punch. I hadn't spoken to him since the night he confronted me at his birthday party, and I wasn't eager to relive the experience. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up, bracing myself for whatever fresh accusation he was about to hurl my way. Hey, Alex said, his voice quieter than I remembered. Can we talk? I hesitated, unsure of his intentions. What do you want, Alex? I asked cautiously. There was a long pause before he answered. I've been thinking a lot about everything, he said. About Chloe, about what she's been saying. And, I don't know, man. Something doesn't feel right. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She's been acting weird, Alex said slowly, like he was piecing the words together as he spoke. At first, I thought it was just the stress, with the pregnancy and everything. But now, she keeps changing details when she talks about what happened between you two. And when I asked her why she won't just take the test, she got super defensive. She even accused me of not supporting her. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This was the first time since the nightmare began that Alex wasn't treating me like a villain. I've been trying to tell you, I said, my voice rising with frustration. She's lying, Alex. I've never been with her. She's doing this because she thinks I'm an easy target. I don't know, man, Alex said again, but this time, he sounded less certain. Maybe I was too quick to believe her. I wanted to protect her, I forced myself to take a deep breath. As much as I wanted to yell at him for not believing me earlier, I knew this wasn't the time. If you really want to protect her, I said carefully, you need to push her to take the test. She's been avoiding it for a reason, Alex. She knows it's not mine. Alex was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. Okay, he said, I'll talk to her, but don't get your hopes up. Chloe's stubborn. It took another 2 weeks of relentless pressure from Alex and me before Chloe finally agreed to the test. By that point, Alex had fully shifted to my side, his frustration with Chloe growing each time she dodged our requests. The breakthrough came during a heated argument at Alex's house, where he flat out told her, if you have nothing to hide, then prove it. Cornered and exhausted, she reluctantly agreed, though not without tears and dramatic accusations of being betrayed by her own brother. The day of the test felt surreal. I barely slept the night before, my mind racing with equal parts anticipation and dread. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios. What if the results somehow came back inconclusive? What if Chloe found a way to manipulate the test? Despite knowing the truth, I couldn't shake the fear that this nightmare might never truly end. When the results finally came in, I was there with Alex, Chloe, and her parents. My own parents had chosen to stay home, still clinging to their belief in Chloe. The doctor handed Chloe the envelope, and I watched as her face went pale. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Alex snatched the paper from her hands and read it aloud. 0% chance of paternity, he said, his voice flat and emotionless. He looked up at Chloe, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. You lied? Chloe burst into tears, her voice cracking as she babbled incoherent excuses. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she sobbed. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. Her parents tried to console her, their faces a mix of shock and sadness. Alex, however, wasn't having it. You ruined his life, he said, his voice trembling with fury. You lied to everyone. And for what? So you wouldn't have to deal with your own mistakes? I should have felt relieved, vindicated. The truth was finally out, and the test had cleared my name. But as I stood there, watching Chloe crumble under the weight of her own lies, all I felt was exhaustion. This wasn't a victory. It was a mess, a tangled web of betrayal and broken trust that couldn't simply be undone with a piece of paper. For a brief moment, I thought the nightmare was finally over. I expected apologies from everyone who had doubted me, especially my parents. But Chloe, incredibly, refused to let go of her narrative. She started spinning a new story, claiming the test must have been tampered with, or that it was somehow wrong. I know what happened, she insisted, her voice trembling with conviction. I know it's his. Even my parents struggled to accept the results. Maybe the test was a mistake, my mom said hesitantly, her voice laced with doubt. These things aren't always accurate, right? Are you serious right now? I snapped. The science is foolproof. What more do you need? She didn't have an answer, but the damage was already done. Chloe's refusal to accept the truth meant the rumors didn't die as quickly as I'd hoped. Some people believed the test. Others clung to her new narrative. My parents offered me half-hearted apologies, but their faith in Chloe lingered, like a stubborn stain that wouldn't wash out. Even Alex, despite his anger, struggled to cut ties with his sister completely. She's still family, he said when I confronted him about it. What am I supposed to do? Pretend she doesn't exist? I didn't know how to respond. The truth had finally come out, but it felt hollow. My reputation was still in tatters, my relationships still fractured. And Chloe? She was already working on a new version of events, one where she was still the victim and I was the villain. It was clear this wasn't the end. It was just another battle in a war I hadn't asked to fight. I thought the DNA test would bring everything crashing down. Chloe's lies, the rumors, the whispers behind my back. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe that my life might go back to normal. But I underestimated just how far Chloe was willing to go to protect her fabricated story. Instead of admitting defeat, she doubled down. The very next day, I woke up to a flood of messages. Chloe had apparently started telling people that the test was invalid. She claimed the lab had made a mistake, or worse, that I had somehow tampered with the results. "It's not over," she wrote in one of her vague social media posts, paired with a cryptic picture of her holding her stomach. The truth always comes out in the end. I couldn't believe it. After everything, after proof, she was still clinging to the lie. At first, I thought no one would buy it. After all, how could anyone deny cold, hard science? But then the comments rolled in. "We believe you, Chloe. Stay strong, mama. He'll slip up eventually." It was like the test hadn't even happened. The weight of their blind support crushed me, and I realized that for some people, the truth didn't matter. The story Chloe had spun was too compelling to let go of. I tried to confront my parents about it, desperate for them to see reason now that the facts were out in the open. They apologized, sort of. My mom sat me down at the kitchen table, holding my hands like she used to when I was a kid, and said, "We're sorry we didn't believe you, but we just wanted to protect the baby. We thought we were doing the right thing." Her words felt like a slap. "You wanted to protect the baby?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "You chose to believe a lie over your own son." It wasn't about choosing sides, my dad chimed in, his tone defensive. It was about making sure Chloe and the baby were okay. We didn't want to risk being wrong. "You were wrong," I snapped, standing up so abruptly the chair scraped against the floor. "And you didn't just doubt me, you abandoned me. Do you have any idea what that's done to me?" They looked at me with a mix of guilt and confusion, as if they genuinely didn't understand the depth of their betrayal. "We're trying to make it right," my mom said softly. "We just need time." Time? Time wouldn't erase the months of being treated like a liar, of watching my parents dote on Chloe while my life fell apart. Their apologies felt hollow, like they were trying to sweep everything under the rug now that the truth was inconvenient for them to deal with. It was clear they didn't fully believe Chloe anymore, but they weren't ready to fully side with me either. They were stuck in some awkward middle ground, and I hated them for it. Alex, to his credit, was furious. He confronted Chloe multiple times, demanding that she come clean. But every time, she found a new way to twist the story. She started claiming that I had pressured her to stay quiet, that I had intimidated her into dropping the matter. "He's manipulative," she told one of our mutual friends, who later relayed the conversation to me. "He scared me into not fighting the results." I didn't know what else to do. Hearing that broke something in me. She wasn't just lying about the baby anymore. She was actively painting me as a monster, someone capable of threats and coercion. It was like she couldn't stop herself, like the lie had grown so big it was consuming her. And the worst part? People believed her. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to keep the rumors alive. Enough to make me feel like I'd never truly escaped the shadow of her accusations. My reputation, already battered, was in shambles. Even though the test results were on my side, the court of public opinion wasn't so easily swayed. Some people saw the truth for what it was, but others latched onto Chloe's new narrative. Why would she lie? They'd say, as if the test results weren't proof enough. It didn't matter that I had science on my side. Her lies were louder, more emotional, and far easier to believe than the cold, hard truth. The toll it took on my life was staggering. Work became unbearable. My co-workers, while less openly judgmental than before, still treated me with a certain awkwardness, like they didn't know whether to pity me or avoid me altogether. My social life was practically non-existent. Most of my friends had distanced themselves, either because they didn't want to take sides or because they secretly still believed Chloe. Every interaction felt tainted, like people were silently questioning whether I was the villain Chloe had painted me to be. Even Alex struggled with the fallout. He tried to be there for me, but I could tell he was torn. "She's my sister," he said one night over beers, his head in his hands. "I love her, but I can't forgive her for what she's done. I don't know how to handle this." I didn't have any advice to give him. I barely knew how to handle it myself. All I could think about was how unfair it all was, that I was still paying the price for Chloe's lies, even after proving my innocence. I wanted to move on, to put this nightmare behind me, but everywhere I turned, there was another reminder of the damage she'd done. By the end of it, I realized the truth wasn't enough. The test should have been my salvation, but instead, it was just another step in a never-ending battle to reclaim my life. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I'd ever win. After everything that had happened, I reached a point where I couldn't keep pretending that I was okay with the way things were. The constant pressure, the never-ending lies, the betrayal from the people I loved, it was all suffocating me. I spent months trying to reason with my parents, trying to get them to see the truth. But the longer I fought, the more it felt like I was drowning in their doubts and Chloe's manipulation. And I realized, finally, that if I didn't let go, I would never get out of this toxic mess. I made the decision to tell my parents I needed space. It wasn't easy, and honestly, it felt like I was cutting off the last part of myself that still wanted to believe everything would be okay. But I had to protect myself, emotionally, mentally, and physically. I couldn't keep allowing them to pretend like everything Chloe said was gospel. I couldn't keep holding on to the hope that one day they would see things my way. It wasn't going to happen, and I needed to stop waiting for a miracle. So I sent them a text, something simple, but sharp enough to cut through the lies. I need some time away from all of this. I can't keep doing this. I need space to heal. It wasn't easy. It felt like I was setting fire to the last bit of hope I had left. But it was the only way I could move forward. I didn't respond to their calls or texts after that. I couldn't. Every time I saw their names pop up, my heart clenched with a mix of anger and hurt that I wasn't ready to process. They hadn't fully sided with me, not until it was too late. The damage was done. And then there was Chloe. That was the hardest part. As much as I hated her for what she had done, as much as she had shattered my life, I still found myself second-guessing whether I was doing the right thing. But I had to cut her off completely. No more excuses. No more trying to fix things. She'd turned my life into a spectacle, ruined my relationships, destroyed my reputation, and made me the villain in a story that was never mine to begin with. I blocked her on every platform, social media, text, email, everything. I made it clear, with finality, that I never wanted to hear from her again. The moment I hit block, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief because I finally felt free of her toxic presence in my life. Guilt because, in some twisted part of me, I knew she was still family to Alex. I wasn't sure what would happen to that relationship, but I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace for the sake of a family that had abandoned me. It wasn't just Chloe. It was everyone who had stood by her, everyone who had dismissed me, everyone who refused to see the truth. I needed to take care of myself. That meant cutting ties with people who weren't supporting me, people who were only holding me back. It wasn't easy, but slowly, I started to feel the weight of that decision lift off my shoulders. I knew I couldn't keep living in the past, constantly replaying everything that had gone wrong, everything that Chloe had done to ruin my life. I needed help to deal with the betrayal, with the anger, and with the gnawing feeling that I was still being punished for something I didn't do. So, I started going to therapy. At first, I went because I felt like I had to. I didn't know how to handle the overwhelming feelings of resentment and grief. But after a few sessions, something shifted. For the first time in months, I felt like I was doing something for myself, not for anyone else. Therapy gave me a space to process all the emotions I had bottled up for so long. It wasn't easy. Some days felt like I was taking one step forward and two steps back. But with each session, I felt like I was getting a little closer to peace. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life. I reconnected with old friends who had stuck by me, people who never believed Chloe's lies. I started picking up hobbies I had abandoned during the chaos, things that used to bring me joy but had been drowned out by the drama. I started taking care of myself again, physically, emotionally, mentally. There were days when I still felt the weight of everything Chloe had done, and there were nights when I found myself lying awake, replaying conversations I'd had with my parents or with Alex, wondering if I could have done something differently. But those moments became fewer and farther between. The more time I spent away from the mess they had dragged me into, the clearer it became that I had done the right thing. It was painful, but it was necessary. I didn't know what the future held, or if things would ever go back to the way they were with Alex and my parents. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. After everything that had happened, I reached a point where I couldn't keep pretending that I was okay with the way things were. The constant pressure, the never-ending lies, the betrayal from the people I loved, it was all suffocating me. I spent months trying to reason with my parents, trying to get them to see the truth. But the longer I fought, the more it felt like I was drowning in their doubts and Chloe's manipulation. And I realized, finally, that if I didn't let go, I would never get out of this toxic mess. I made the decision to tell my parents I needed space. It wasn't easy, and honestly, it felt like I was cutting off the last part of myself that still wanted to believe everything would be okay. But I had to protect myself, emotionally, mentally, and physically. I couldn't keep allowing them to pretend like everything Chloe said was gospel. I couldn't keep holding on to the hope that one day they would see things my way. It wasn't going to happen, and I needed to stop waiting for a miracle. So I sent them a text, something simple, but sharp enough to cut through the lies. I need some time away from all of this. I can't keep doing this. I need space to heal. It wasn't easy. It felt like I was setting fire to the last bit of hope I had left. But it was the only way I could move forward. I didn't respond to their calls or texts after that. I couldn't. Every time I saw their names pop up, my heart clenched with a mix of anger and hurt that I wasn't ready to process. They hadn't fully sided with me, not until it was too late. The damage was done. And then there was Chloe. That was the hardest part. As much as I hated her for what she had done, as much as she had shattered my life, I still found myself second-guessing whether I was doing the right thing. But I had to cut her off completely. No more excuses. No more trying to fix things. She'd turned my life into a spectacle, ruined my relationships, destroyed my reputation, and made me the villain in a story that was never mine to begin with. I blocked her on every platform, social media, text, email, everything. I made it clear, with finality, that I never wanted to hear from her again. The moment I hit block, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief because I finally felt free of her toxic presence in my life. Guilt because, in some twisted part of me, I knew she was still family to Alex. I wasn't sure what would happen to that relationship, but I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace for the sake of a family that had abandoned me. It wasn't just Chloe. It was everyone who had stood by her, everyone who had dismissed me, everyone who refused to see the truth. I needed to take care of myself. That meant cutting ties with people who weren't supporting me, people who were only holding me back. It wasn't easy, but slowly I started to feel the weight of that decision lift off my shoulders. I knew I couldn't keep living in the past, constantly replaying everything that had gone wrong, everything that Chloe had done to ruin my life. I needed help to deal with the betrayal, with the anger, and with the gnawing feeling that I was still being punished for something I didn't do. So, I started going to therapy. At first, I went because I felt like I had to. I didn't know how to handle the overwhelming feelings of resentment and grief. But after a few sessions, something shifted. For the first time in months, I felt like I was doing something for myself, not for anyone else. Therapy gave me a space to process all the emotions I had bottled up for so long. It wasn't easy. Some days felt like I was taking one step forward and two steps back. But with each session, I felt like I was getting a little closer to peace. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life. I reconnected with old friends who had stuck by me, people who never believed Chloe's lies. I started picking up hobbies I had abandoned during the chaos, things that used to bring me joy but had been drowned out by the drama. I started taking care of myself again, physically, emotionally, mentally. There were days when I still felt the weight of everything Chloe had done, and there were nights when I found myself lying awake, replaying conversations I'd had with my parents or with Alex, wondering if I could have done something differently. But those moments became fewer and farther between. The more time I spent away from the mess they had dragged me into, the clearer it became that I had done the right thing. It was painful, but it was necessary. I didn't know what the future held, or if things would ever go back to the way they were with Alex and my parents. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. Even now, months after the DNA test cleared my name, I still feel like I'm living in the shadow of what happened. People don't bring it up anymore. Not directly, at least, but there's a subtle shift in the way they interact with me. Some keep their distance, their polite smiles just a little too forced. Others act like nothing ever happened, which in a way is worse. They expect me to move on, to forget the months of accusations and humiliation, as though the damage should disappear just because the truth finally came out. There are moments when I catch people looking at me with doubt, like they're still holding on to the possibility that Chloe might have been right, despite the proof. It's infuriating and exhausting. The test should have been the end of it, but the rumors lingered. For some, the lie Chloe spun is just too compelling to fully let go. It doesn't matter that the facts are on my side. Some people will always remember me as the guy who might have fathered Chloe's baby. My relationship with my parents is a fragile thread, frayed and worn to the point of breaking. They apologized after the test, of course, but their words felt hollow. "We just wanted to protect the baby," my mom said, as if that somehow justified choosing Chloe over me, their own son. "We see each other occasionally, holidays, family gatherings, but it's not the same. There's a distance between us now, a tension that neither of us knows how to address." They'll ask how I'm doing, but it always feels perfunctory, like they're checking a box rather than genuinely caring. I can't bring myself to fully forgive them, and maybe I never will. Alex and I barely talk anymore. After the results came out, he tried to mend things between us, but our conversations felt forced. I could tell he was struggling to balance his anger at Chloe with his loyalty to her. "She's still my sister," he said once, as if that excused everything. I don't blame him for loving her, but it's hard to forget how easily he believed her over me. The trust we once had is gone, and while I don't think he meant to betray me, his actions spoke louder than his apologies ever could. As for Chloe, she's disappeared from my life completely. I heard through the grapevine that she moved out of town, though no one seems to know where. Part of me feels relief, knowing she's no longer a constant presence, no longer lurking in the corners of my life, waiting to drop another bombshell. But another part of me wonders what she's doing now. Has she found someone else to manipulate? Another scapegoat to pin her problems on? The thought keeps me up some nights, not out of guilt, but out of fear that someone else might go through what I did. There's a lingering bitterness that I can't quite shake. Sometimes, I find myself replaying old conversations in my head, imagining what I should have said or done differently. Other times, I wonder if there was some way I could have avoided the entire situation, some red flag I missed, some choice I could have made to stop Chloe from turning my life upside down. But then I remind myself that none of this was my fault. Chloe made her choices, and the fallout was hers to own, not mine. Moving forward hasn't been easy. Therapy has helped, but trust? That's something I'm not sure I'll ever fully give again. Every new interaction, every new friendship feels like it comes with an unspoken risk. What if they turn on me too? What if they believe someone else's lies over my truth? It's exhausting, constantly second-guessing people's intentions, but it feels safer than letting myself be vulnerable again. Sometimes, I wonder if things will ever go back to normal. I think about how simple my life was before all of this, how I could walk into a room without feeling like everyone was judging me. But other times, I remind myself that the people who truly care about me will believe in me without needing proof. The ones who doubted me, who turned their backs on me, aren't worth my energy. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I've started focusing on the small victories, rebuilding my social life, reconnecting with the friends who stuck by me, finding joy in things I used to love. It's not perfect, and some days are harder than others, but I'm trying. That's all I can do. The scars Chloe left on my life will never fully heal, but I'm learning to live with them. They're a reminder of how quickly trust can be broken, how easily lies can spread, and how important it is to protect yourself, even from the people you think you know best. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I'll never let anyone take advantage of me like that again.